Greetings and salutations. Welcome to this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Before we begin, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and share the show with a friend. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. And as a reminder, if you haven't noticed already, if you haven't listened, Play Noir is back. Returning for its 2025 seasons. We are now accepting submissions for our November run. Play Noir, an evening of film noir-styled one-act plays. You can send your submissions. If you already have one under your belt, feel free to send it to info@punkmonkeyproductions.com. And for more information and guidelines, visit www.punkmonkeyproductions.com. We'll be accepting submissions through June 30th. My guest today is one of the pioneers of hip-hop theater. He received his MFA in playwriting from UCLA School of Theater, Film, and Television, where he was awarded the coveted Audrey Skirball Kennis Award for Best Play for an unprecedented 2 years. He is the past chair of the Department of Theater, Film, and Digital Production at the University of California, Riverside, and founding director of Riverside Studios. He is a Fulbright Fellow, and his work has toured Romania, Poland, Austria, Hungary, Turkey, and his native Honduras, as well as numerous venues throughout the U.S. His play Dreamscape received a record 6 2016 Los Angeles NAACP nominations, winning 3, including Best Director. His play, The Last Play by Rickerby Hinds, opened April 26 and runs through May 25th at Latino Theater Company in downtown Los Angeles. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Rickerby Hinds.
How are you doing?
Thank you.
Intros are always interesting
right? Yeah, especially if I can get through them.
No, that was cool.
And I'm glad that Lucy sent me the pronunciation, because more often than not, I always forget to ask. And then right when it gets to that point, I'm like, no, I'm either going to win it or lose it.
Yeah, saying names. I just emceed an event. And so that's always that crucial moment. But I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah,
yes.
My pleasure.
And thank you for having me.
My pleasure. No, thanks for coming out. So, all right. I mean, I guess we start with the obvious.
Yeah.
What's it? Hip hop theater? What is it?
So hip hop theater, they say, I believe the bio says pioneer. I usually joke that pioneer just means that you've been doing something for a long time. But essentially, I'm part of that first generation of hip hop heads. I just recently turned 60, so I'm part of, that space. And really so many of us who grew up with that first hip hop influence went on to do other things, and one of those things that we went on to do was theater. And so the influence of hip hop culture on our writing, on our production, on our style of storytelling, on our aesthetics is essentially what became known as hip hop theater.
Okay.
Now I kind of do a shorthand thing, and I'll say Hamilton, and I don't think Lin-Manuel Miranda defines Hamilton as hip hop theater, but if you look at the elements that are used in Hamilton, right, you have MC and you have breakdance and you have, these elements that are part of the evolution of hip hop culture.
Sure.
So when we're looking at hip hop theater, the way I look at it is really, if you use one of the founding performative elements of hip hop culture as the primary storytelling tool on the stage. Okay. And then you can extrapolate that. So for instance, so we're looking at MC and breakdance and DJ and graffiti as those founding performative elements. And then you have the element of knowledge. That's the fifth element. But I've created work that uses beatboxing, right? So beatboxing in my mind is an extrapolation of the DJ.
Sure. Okay.
I create work that uses tableaus. I've created a piece called Uncovered, a pageant of hip hop masters, where we recreate life-size versions of hip hop album covers using tableaus and live DJing. Okay. So it's just really looking at how you can take these elements, these performative elements, and then just turn them into tools for the stage. And so that's what I've been doing for a minute. I want to say 30 plus years, and came up with a group of early hip hop theater practitioners like Will Power, like Universes, like Danny Hawk, Camila Forbes. These are folks who, back in the 90s, we were creating work using these elements.
Okay, now forgive me, because it should have been at the bottom of this. You've got something coming out very soon.
Yes.
And
yes.
Can we talk about that?
So let's talk about this. So On the 26th of April, the last play by Rickerby Hinds premieres at LATC downtown. It's a commissioned play by the Latino Theater Company. Okay. And so the synopsis, which I always make my students give to me in my classes, is an Afro-Latino playwright has been commissioned to write a play. When he gets stuck, he decides that the way to become unstuck is to bring characters to life from previous plays that he has written. Okay. When he brings these characters to life, 5 different characters from 5 different plays, the characters realize that they're in a space, an empty space. They're in the place where characters exist when they're not being produced. And so they decide that instead of helping him write another play populated with more characters that will exist in this non-space, that they should actually kill him instead of helping him.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so that's the last play by Rickerby Hinds. My name is Rickerby Hinds. So the playwright being embodied on the stage is a character based on a creation of myself.
Is this going to be your last play?
I believe so. For a couple of reasons. Well, let me just go back a little bit. The freedom that I gained by writing this play as the last play that I will write was invaluable. I was writing with a freedom that I haven't written with since I wrote my first couple plays. Okay. And in writing those plays, I was just someone who had never taken a playwriting class. I was just someone who was just writing, wanted to tell a story on stage. With this play, the reason for the title is I think that for me, the journey that I've taken as a playwright has been amazing, has been interesting. Simultaneously being a professor of playwriting and screenwriting at a university has been amazing. And I think what I want to do is look at how I can serve a different function within the theatrical space. Okay. So not so much serving as a playwright, but perhaps as a producer, perhaps as someone who works more closely with other writers, but doing something different from sitting down, coming up with a concept or an idea, and then taking 2 years to bring that idea to fruition. So in a sense, in that traditional mode of writing a play, I believe this is the last one. Like it feels like, this is a thing. All right. We'll see.
You always go back.
Boxers retire all the time and come back.
Well, you talked about your journey, and for someone who had never written a play, taken a play, or never written a play, and never taken a playwriting class, what'd you learn? I mean, what was that like?
That instinct to tell a story on stage and to put people on stage who looked like, sounded like, thought like, had aesthetics that were comparable to my own was what drove me to start writing. The first thing that I wrote was a skit. It was called Children of the King. It was for Martin Luther King Day. I believe it was 1989 or 88. And I wanted to do something different for Martin Luther King Day. This was at UC Riverside, and we traditionally would have a speaker come in, speak on Martin Luther King or on a topic, and then they would leave. And I thought, well, what if we took those funds and as students, what if we created a program? What if we created something? So that was the catalyst, the impetus for doing it. And so for that program, we had an essay contest. We had a fraternity stepping, and I wrote a 10, 12-minute skit called Children of the King. Very traditional first-time play in some ways. I think 4 or 5 students had been given the assignment of finding a poem that represented who they were and bringing that poem back to class the next day. So essentially it was, classroom setting. I took some desks from classrooms. I'm not sure if I took them officially or not, but we put them on the stage. And it was that moment of hearing something that I had written in the middle of the night, because that's when I wrote, and hearing an audience react to that thing and going, oh, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And so the next year, Martin Luther King Day's program was my first full-length play, the first day of the rest of your life. So that was the entire program. And so from there, I just kept going, just kept writing.
And when your first full length came, had you jumped into taking a class yet, or you just like, I'm just gonna see how it goes?
I was under the delusion that if I learned the craft, that it would scare away the muse. I was under this delusion that that this thing just came naturally. It just came, and the muse came through your head or wherever, and you just wrote it down. And if you mess with it, then you would be, messing with the muse. Of course, that's BS, I believe, and I don't do anything without doing rewrites. I don't, I've learned that writing is a craft, right? It's a cliche, and it's a cliche for a reason. It is a craft. It takes the inspiration to come up with a concept, but then it takes the execution to actually take that concept and turn it into something that is viable for the stage or for wherever you perform your work. And so I did not take, even though I had opportunities to take playwriting classes, I didn't. I was kind of holding back because I didn't want to lose that thing.
Sure. Am I mistaken? Because I may be interpreting what you said. You said that now I do rewrites. So were you not editing and rewriting back then?
I didn't really believe in rewriting. I thought, this is the way it came to me. This is the way it should be. I can remember having a play where I would see like, that comma is out of place, or that comma should be closer, and I wouldn't change it. It was, it's just one of those things. Sure. A young writer, you're thinking, this is how art happens. You don't work at it. It just comes to you, and when it comes to you, you just put it down. Now, before anyone sees any of my work, it's at least at a second or third rewrite. That first draft is just what one of my mentors calls vomit. The first draft, you just vomit it out on the floor, on the ground, and your job as a writer is to get down in the vomit and see if you can find something useful in that vomit. And so that's kind of how I look at the process. You spit it out, and then there's something good in there somewhere. And so you get in there and you put in the work, and it takes me a year to 2 years to complete what I would consider a draft of a play. So is that when rewriting and editing came into play, but after you took your first class? Or did you just realize, So I didn't really do a rewrite until I accidentally took a play reading class. So this was a class where we were reading Latine plays, and it's a longer story, but I had to make up a class in order to graduate. And so we're in class, and the professor, we're talking about different things, and we go around, and he says, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm a playwright, because somewhere in the career center that said, always say that thing you want to be, even if you're not. So I said, I'm a playwright, and he said, his name was Carlos Morton, and he says, do you have something that I can read? And I just happened to have a play that I completed called Our Little Secret. I gave him the play. He gave me a page of notes. And this was the first time that I had gotten feedback from someone other than my friends and family, who will usually tell you, yo, that's cool. And he gave me a page of notes, and I'm going, well, my friends and family have told me this play is really good. What are these notes? Things like you should have a protagonist with a clearly defined want or need. Things like you shouldn't go off on tangents randomly for no reason. And I actually still have that letter. It's a typewritten one-page letter.
That's awesome.
And so I decided, well, this guy does, he doesn't know. He doesn't know me. He's, I'm writing from a different point of view. And so I happened to know someone else who was involved with the theater, and I took those notes to her. Her name was Kathy Irvin. I said, look, Carlos gave me these notes, and I'm writing from an Afrocentric point of view. There is no I in Afrocentricity. There's only we, therefore there's no protagonist. And I did what a lot of my students do, which is instead of trying to take the notes, see how those notes can improve your work, you spend the time trying to figure out how to not do the work on the notes. But what Carlos did is he promised me, or he gave me I won't call it a bribe, but it was a promise that if I made those changes in the play, that he would put that play into a festival that was happening at UCR.
Okay.
I made the changes. He put the play in the festival, and that's where I met Edith Villarreal, who said to me after seeing the play, we'd love to have you at UCLA. And that's how I got into the MFA program at UCLA, by doing my first rewrite, however reluctantly. So that's how I started. That's how I started to rewrite. And so now there are about 3 or 4 plays, probably 3 plays that I don't really include in my CV, because I never did rewrites on those plays. And I can look at those plays and go, just one rewrite would have made it so much better. And so I don't include them because I don't want them out as a sample of my work, number one. Number two, I'm probably not going to go back and rewrite them at this point.
Sure.
So that's when I started rewriting. And since then, I've never looked back.
Good for you. So there's two things that you said that piqued my interest, only because his name comes up in these episodes sometimes. And so you said the muse and do the work.
Yeah.
Do you read Stephen Pressfield?
I don't know.
Okay, so Stephen Pressfield wrote 4 books. One is the War of Art, when he talks about the muse. When you just show up, the muse will show up.
Yeah.
Turning Pro, I think, is number 2. Do the Work is number 3, and then number 4 is No One Wants to Read Your Shit.
Okay.
So
I will be.
And so it's kind of, So and they're easy reads. You can bust them out in an hour.
Well, even the titles though, titles speak to. Man, I'm about to get these books, especially the last one, which is something that I will say to my students often, is the way I write is that I write with the thought in mind that no one wants to go see my work. And part of that came about as a result of those early years, where the reason I wrote hip-hop with hip-hop elements was not just because I was in that space, but because all my friends were into hip-hop. So I thought, if I can be like, hey, you're going to get to rhyme or you can get to dance, then they would actually show up with their lines memorized. That didn't happen as often as I would hope. But the idea for me is that when I write, I don't write, even though I deal with topics that I believe are important, I never write with the conceit that someone should read this or come see this because I think it's important.
Right.
The only reason I will put something in a play is because I believe this will be very interesting. This will keep an audience riveted. This will be something that will be compelling on the stage. I don't write with the arrogance of thinking I am addressing a topic that is so important that even if it's boring as hell, people should sit through it. I just find that to be just the height of arrogance. If you're asking me to come sit in a dark room for 2 hours, then you should earn my time, because that's 2 hours that I won't get back. And I'm going to be 2 hours closer to death. And that may be taken a little too far, but it really is the way I approach what I do. And when I talk to my students, I'm going, I'm going to read your pages because I'm going to read your pages. But an audience or someone who has other stuff to do, they're not going to go, I have other stuff to do that can probably be more interesting. But instead I'm going to do this. Your job is to say, hey, my thing is, if you come do my thing, you're going to be happy that you did this thing instead of something else. So that's my approach. That's why I really love the titles of the books. I'm gonna jump into those.
Sure, absolutely. Please do. Yeah, they're well worth the reads.
Yeah.
I've only listened to No One Wants to Read Your Shit because it's entertaining, but but yeah. What was Son of Kings? I'm sorry.
Children of the King.
Children of Kings.
Children of the King. Yes.
Of the King. Is that did that have hip hop elements to it?
It didn't have overt hip hop elements, other than I guess we could extrapolate poetry to spoken word to rap. So it did have elements of poetry in it, but in that piece, it really was kind of a very straightforward, conversational, dramatic dialogue in it with some comedy in there. I didn't write a play that I perceived or sat down to write as overtly hip hop theater until about 1990, when I wrote a play called Days to Come. And Days to Come was what you might call a play with music. The premise was that hip hop culture and hip hop music had been forced underground, and it was no longer legal. And I believe there were 7 different MCs got together in a hidden basement somewhere to try to figure out how to keep this culture from dying. And so it was a conversation on what type of hip hop style. Do we do gangster rap? Do we do pop hip hop? Do we do political rap? So they're deciding which one of these genres would be the ideal one that we decide this will be the one to come out of the space. And so in that play, there were hip hop songs, there was movement and dance. It followed that traditional plot of what's going to happen, who having an argument. We even had a scene where the characters are playing the dozens, where they're bagging on each other, and it was me being overtly intentional about using the element of rap as a primary language for that play. So that was the first one where yeah.
Okay. From when you started writing or inserting hip hop into your work,
yeah,
what changed once you started editing?
For me, it was looking at how do I tighten things up. How do I make things more compelling and more powerful, but putting myself in a particular box or putting myself in a particular space that forced me to extrapolate that element. And what I mean by that is I wrote a hip-hop opera years ago called Keep Heads Ringing. It's an adaptation of Richard Wagner's Ring Cycle. And so in Keep Heads Ringing, what I did was I knew it was going to be rap. I knew it was going to be MCing. But in order to force myself to write better lyrics, I limited each character to particular references when it came to metaphors and similes. So I had characters whose references had to do with the universe. I had characters whose references had to do with literature. I had characters whose references had to do with death and disease. And so what it did for me is it forced me to be more creative in that space when it came to editing and rewriting. So one example is I have a character named Ra, whose references have to do with the universe and how great Ra is. And Ra begins by saying, I am the monad, the first seed, the essence, the builder, foundation, space producer, most dramatic power wielder. Immaculate truth, all that is me. I am the past, present, future destiny. I am God, so bow and call me Ra. Thinking you can hang on your best day? Nah. So run, because you ain't ready, son, to stare into the flare of the sun. So by limiting myself to the references that Ra could make having to do with the universes and being a god, the first lines, I am the monad, the first seed, the essence, the builder, foundation, space producer, most dramatic power wielder. Those are all different ways that different religions or different groups refer to God. The first seed, the essence, the builder, foundation. So it was, and it took me 5 years to write this thing, but it was a fascinating process to not just sit down and write the rhymes, because the rhymes also have to tell the story. Right. Dialogue still has to move the plot forward. It still has to give us insight into the character. It still has to give us exposition. So trying to do those three things while limiting myself to certain points of reference was challenging. It was probably one of the most useful things or exercises that I've done as a writer. Because now when I sit down to write just quote unquote regular dialogue, I'm like, oh, I can use any words. I can, I can use any references, any metaphors. And so those were that particular play was one where it was both challenging myself, but also looking at how can I be as creative as possible and still, draw the audience into a story about greed and into a story about love and about, this mythical story based on Norse mythology. How do I incorporate, references to Norse mythology into a story that is, hip hop driven, based on an opera inspired by Norse mythology. So layering the work is one of my favorite things to do with when I write.
How unpack layering and how to achieve it.
Oh.
So this is what happens every episode. It never fails. Because you're not in the act of doing it, I always throw a question out that it's so unfair because it's like if I was in the middle of it, I could tell you how to do it. But now that if you can.
Wow. Yeah, that's layering. So, and I'm actively trying to think of a present example. But for me, I am most fascinated by, inspired by writing, be it on a stage or on film, where a line of dialogue or an exchange has layers that that will work if you get the first layer or if you get the second and third layer of what's being said. With my work, I try to use words and references in a way that allows the audience to experience the work more than once and feel a different experience with each viewing. So I wrote a play called Dreamscape, and this play is based on the 1998 shooting of a young woman named Taisha Miller in Riverside, California. And Dreamscape uses beatbox, spoken word, and hip-hop dance to explore the life and death of this young woman. In the play itself, there are places where I will use simple lines, like the first line of the play says, "Ever have one of those dreams where nothing comes out when you try to scream?" Right? It's the very beginning of the play. And we go on to experience the journey of this young woman who was passed out in her car when she was shot 12 times. We go through the entire journey and we hear that the play ends with that same line, "Ever have one of those dreams where nothing happens when you try to scream?" And we experience her trying to, this time trying to scream and trying to have something come out, but nothing comes out. The layering for me is, number one, I believe that line or that moment is something that a lot of us have experienced, where we're dreaming and at least for, I've experienced it a lot, where you can't say anything, like nothing's coming out. Yeah. So at that level, I hope that immediately the audience goes, yeah, I have. And then the second layer is the character is passed out or is possibly dreaming, but they're in a state of non-awareness. So that's the second layer, that I am in this dream where nothing comes out when I try to scream. So for me, that's the second layer. And then the third layer is that the character is actually passed away. So that will never happen again. They will never be able to speak again. And so for me, those are things that I try to incorporate in my work. I was trying to think of another example where I actually take a word and have that word have different meanings. So in the current play, the last play by Rickerby Hinds, there's a character, the Rickerby character, who at the beginning of the play they say he looks like Denzel Washington, and so at one point in the play, the character is in a dilemma, and the character goes, okay, 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 and just those okays, if I've done it right, will resonate with those folks who have seen Denzel do those okays. Mm-hmm. But within the context of the play itself, those okays have a different significance and they're serving a different purpose. But through the delivery, once again, we layer it with at least 2 layers of significance in the story. So that's what, like, for me, I love, that's what I love. That, to me, the writing, that's what I love doing. Finding those spaces where nuance and those subtle, still moments can resonate in just a huge way.
So, and thank you for that explanation.
And thank you for that question. You messed with me like that. I was like, shoot.
Well, and so that leads me to the next question, which is really what I'm glad I let you go, because I almost rephrased it, which is more like how's the process? What's the technique? Are you doing it? Are you layering as you write, or are you getting that vomit out, picking up all those things that you've already written, and then like noticing patterns and like, okay, oh, I got this. I know how to add that. Or are you actually doing it throughout?
Genius writers probably do it on the front end. I do it probably more so in the rewriting process.
Okay.
So I'll use an example from Dreamscape. In Dreamscape, the character at the end of the play says a prayer. Now I lay me down and sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. Bless mommy, daddy, bless my cousin Tony, my cousin Freddie. This is Maisha. You know me. Saying this to God. When I originally wrote the play, that was the only place where that phrase, you know me, happened. And I was like, wow, this is, for me, what Maisha is saying is, hey, God, I'm coming up. You know who I am. What happened subsequently is I went back and I found places where Maisha would say, you know me. So one point, Maisha's talking about, we went to the club, I went to the club with my friends, and, so-and-so, these guys approached me, and you know me, I'm going to be nice. So we planned it there. A second time, I don't remember what the second one is, but Maisha say and says, all right, if you know me, that's right. If you know me, I got sports skills. So by it happening at the end, the resonance happens with the repetition. And I didn't come up with the repetition. It happened backwards. And so in the rewriting, for me, is where a lot of that cool stuff happens. That's the space where I can look at the entire picture and see places where I can improve things by adding or subtracting or tweaking or changing things. And so that's the way it happens for me. I believe also that there are instinctive things that will happen during that first draft where my mind may be preparing for it, but I don't know if I'm necessarily aware that. So like I said, that you know me just happened that's how I wrote it. This is Maisha. You know me. I'm like, oh, that's a nice button, and that's the end of that part of the play. Mm-hmm. And then when I started working on it, when we started rehearsing, and I was like, oh, if we hear that, then it's this person trying to position themselves, possibly feeling like this may be the end of my life. Is God gonna welcome me when God sees me? And let me just make sure that God knows it. Like, you put me here, you know me. So that's the idea behind it. Yeah.
I have one question about the Raw. That segment that you gave, that opening segment. Yeah. Is he speaking to other characters, or is he speaking to the audience as his introduction, just out of curiosity?
He's introducing himself to the audience, to the world, and he's also bringing a sense of braggadocio that a lot of MCs will bring to a space. This is who I am. I am a god, so bow and call me Ra. You can't stare into the flare of the son of the sun. So it's him essentially in his in his space, just almost like reflecting on how great he perceives himself to be.
Sure. Okay. So let's. I mean, obviously, do you? I don't want to say is it all hip hop? Is it all rhyming, or is there regular dialogue sprinkled in there as well?
Yeah.
Am I being articulate about
absolutely.
what I'm asking?
Yeah. So through my work travels the gamut. So Keep Heads Ringing is a hip hop opera intended to be all rap with operatic elements, gospel, hip hop, R&B. My play Birthmark, which is my thesis play at UCLA, is a traditional, dramatic play with elements of gospel sprinkled in, with elements of hip hop sprinkled in. With Dreamscape, Dreamscape is I call it it's a one person piece with beatbox and accompaniment. So the character is telling these multiple stories to the coroner in hopes that the coroner will decide not to declare her dead. And so the character tells these different stories in just regular dialogue, and then there's hip hop movement that's attached to it, then the beatboxing element, and the beatboxer plays multiple characters in addition to serving as the musical accompaniment. So the plays that I write, they will travel the gamut. Uncovered, a pageant of hip hop masters, is all tableaus. There is no dialogue in that play. In that performance, play performance. And so there's a live DJ who is mixing music from the different artists. And the way the work was produced was that the audience moved from one room to another in a museum space. And they would come into a room and there would be a tableau, perhaps of Salt and Pepper or the Wu-Tang Clan or Biggie and Tupac. And then they would go through different motions that were, connected to their characters. And then we would hear a mix of music connected to, the different artists. And then they would go back into the tableau. So it was, in my mind, it was looking at the element of graffiti as a performance. How do you take graffiti that can be fairly static and turn it into a performative tool? How do we make graffiti move? I have a dream one day of taking a comic book and putting a comic book on stage using tableaus.
Well, you can't. This is your last play.
Oh, dang, I forgot about that. Yeah, you're right. I will plant that seed in someone else and see what happens.
I think you should do it. And you can call it Psych.
You know what? I will asterisk your name at the bottom of that first page.
So that's exactly where I was going. So what does this look like on the page? Is this formatted as if, hypothetically, I'm going to use the term in a musical?
Yeah.
Hey, here's some dialogue, and then here's kind of like the book of a musical.
Yes.
Where it says book and lyrics by so and so. Is that what it looks like?
So that's what the hip hop opera looks like. With Dreamscape, it's my fallback format is traditional playwriting formatting. That's the space where I'm the most safe. And whenever I am doing something that falls into, say, a musical style, I will try to adhere to those rules in the writing of that particular segment of the play. And so, I try to, the thing that I try to do is I try to be consistent. So even if I'm doing something that is a different genre, I try to make sure that I'm consistent in how I'm conveying it on the page, so the actors, directors know this is my intention. But yeah, I will try to, if I'm writing something that is a musical, I will try to make sure that it's formatted in that proper style. And then writing the libretto for Keep Heads Ringing, same kind of thing where, because I had never written an opera, so I just kind of went and looked at, okay, this is the proper formatting. This is how we make sure that, those who are reading it, both in hopes of being produced or actors reading through it, have the ease. Because a script is just, it's just a blueprint. And the function of a script is for it to be legible. And that legibility really depends on consistency. Like if actors know if, whatever's in the parentheses I don't say, or, I'll do different things where I will have, the little square parentheses and I'll say, this word that you see in these squares, I don't want you to say that word. I want you to feel that word.
Okay.
And so I will, when I first started writing, I didn't know you could have that kind of freedom by making those kind of notes. And subsequently, I've learned, you design your play the way you want it designed. And if you're consistent and if you let the readers know this is what this means, they'll pick it up and it'll work.
Okay.
Yeah. But there are a lot of places in my work where I want actors to embody, or I want them to, I use the word feel a word, but not say that word. And so it took me a while to figure out how to include that in my plays. And so what I did with earlier plays is I actually would include the word. Okay. And I'd be like, no, I don't want them to say the word. I just want it to be like, sup, instead of saying, yo, what's up?
Okay. So it's not, you're not bracketing an emotion.
Not an not an emotion.
Right.
That word. So
I'll use the one you just gave. So like what's up is just kind of like
yes.
Rather than saying he flips his head, it's just
right. And being cognizant of not directing on a page or not, but knowing that the kind of dialogue that I enjoy most on the stage and on screen is dialogue that seems that it's not written. And I always, when I see a well-written or a well-performed moment or scene in a play or in a screenplay, I'm going, man, I wonder if that was written or not. I would love, as a writer, I always want it to be written. Because if it's not written, then it's the performers who bring that brilliance. And I love brilliant performers, but I also love the idea of being able to put things on a page that seem improvisational or that seem like they're just making it up in a moment.
Sure. There was a piece that I can't remember the name of it now, and it was the only time that I actually got to see the play before I interviewed the playwright. Uh-huh. So I kind of like, was this moment, was that on the page, or was that written, or was that and so kind of the same thing. It's like That was the only time that I've actually had that opportunity.
Yes.
Well, I take that back. When there was a high school student that I saw a piece at in a festival that I work at in Sacramento, and just hearing all the obstacles they had to overcome just to get that performance on stage. I'm just like, and I'm listening. And then when she said everything that they had to go through after, or up to, during rehearsals and stuff like that, like rehearsing at night with flashlights in the cold, in winter, things like that, Wow. So when I'm like, I need you on the podcast. I think that, okay, there's 3 times. And somebody from Harvard Westlake, I actually had, because he wrote a musical called Bakery of Love. And he made it seem so simple. And like this, you make it like so easy. And I'm like, I gotta have you on the podcast. So, what does DJing look like on the page?
So DJing is probably the most difficult one for me to put on the page, because there are a lot of times when I have a particular intent, and I know what it sounds like, and the easiest way to do that is to give an example of what that thing sounds like. those times when I try to put it on the page, for example, in the last play, there's a moment where a song is playing. It's a sound cue, and there's a song that's playing, and I want there to be an interruption in the song. And so what I say is, the song is playing, and then the next stage direction is the song stops as if someone put their hand on a record and stopped it from playing. And then the next stage direction is the sound begins as if that person let go of the record and the record started to spin again. So given those kind of specific stage directions are different than, just giving a sound cue to, this place to here and it stops and then it starts back here. Right. And because for me, the DJing element has such specific nuances, you have scratch and you have, rewinding, you have, you can drop a needle in different parts of a record and it can play. So DJing to me is a performative element for the stage. I very rarely will just have someone just play a song, right? If a song is being played, there's an intention behind it. There is a specific use or desire to highlight that form of storytelling, because once again, when you're looking at DJing, and I look at it as a performative tool as well, I teach a hip hop theater class at UCR, and part of what I do is I try to get them to think of DJing as a way of telling a story. So what do turntables do? Well, they spin. So that's one thing. They can stop. They can go backwards. You can jump around in time, so I can be on Tuesday and then I can be on Friday and then I can be back on. So to think of that element as not just we play music, but it is, a tool that can turn time, reverse time. We're going to start all over, or we'll jump to the end and then I'll bring you. So just you looking at the element that way in a more abstract kind of vein, but then also looking at DJing and what kind of sounds and what kind of mixes, when you talk about layering, right? DJing is just one of those amazing places where you can layer. So there's a song by Lil Wayne called 6 Foot, 7 Foot. And the sample is 6 foot, 7 foot, 8 foot, jump. And then he goes, and it's around. Well, that 6 foot, 7 foot, 8 foot is from the Banana Song by Harry Belafonte, right? So what DJing does is it allows you to layer in an entirely different way. Because if it's like Kanye West and Jay-Z, their song called Otis. Well, it's a song by Otis Redding, right? Mm-hmm. Try a Little Tenderness. And so they take Great Try song. A Little Tenderness. Yeah, amazing song. And they pull that, it makes it easier. And they take that and that becomes the loop. But then if you extrapolate and you go and listen to Try a Little Tenderness and what Otis Redding is talking about, and then you find out, well, Otis Redding was part of this entire generation of, R&B singers. And, it allows you to learn, teach, explore things by simply using a sample or by simply layering what is happening on the stage, what is happening vocally, and what is happening musically.
Now, how do you cast that?
So one of the dilemmas with my work has been finding the bodies that can do the things that I envision in my head. When I wrote Keep Heads Ringing, I envisioned performers who could rap and who could sing operatically. And who could dance or who could move. When I started working on Dreamscape, I envisioned a DJ who could create dialogue by mixing bits and pieces of records live so that the character, that DJ could say, hey, what's up? But so I I eventually moved to using a beatboxer to do those things because I realized the degree of difficulty was just like maybe more than I wanted it to be. But the casting part of it is finding performers with expertise in those particular genres and then convincing them to do theater. Which a few years ago I did a play called Buck World 1. And in Buck World 1 I use crump dancing, spoken word, video projections to explore our existence in the universe. Now, crump dancing is this amazing form of dance that is very explosive. It's the bodies are, they have these moments of explosion, 30 seconds to 2-3 minutes of just like intense movement and dance. So I went and I worked with a group of crump dancers in San Bernardino. And the dilemma with working with crump dancers was that one of the dilemmas was that they may show up a week after we've rehearsed a scene and they may go, Curb, you know what? I don't do that anymore, man. My style has changed.
Oh, geez.
Like, yo, hold up. We need, that was, we locked that in. And then the idea of repetition, of doing the same thing over and over again, which is what we do in theater to lock things down, was just not, it was difficult to convince them.
Isn't that what dances you do? They have to repeat it so you remember. No,
well, not crump dancers.
Oh, okay.
Crump, like with crump, it's almost as if they're trying to create something new every time they step into the cipher. So
it's more like an interpretive form of dance?
Not even interpretive as it's more improvisational. They're foundational things that they will do, right? They'll do a stomp, they'll do a chest pop, they'll do certain things that will kind of is the preamble to now I'm about to do the thing. And so it was a challenge, but we ended up with a really compelling performance. Actually, the show we did, Buck World 1, ended up being the first hip-hop theater performance at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. We did it at the Green Show in 2008, I want to say. So the challenge is real. The rewards are amazing if this form of storytelling can be, I don't even want to say harness, but if we can figure out how to use it on the stage, how we can take those theatrical elements, rehearsals and repetition and precision and all these different types of things that may go against that particular style of storytelling or that dance form. Yeah, but that one was interesting.
How many times did when you recruited people, it was like, hey, we're gonna come do theater for a little while, come do this piece. How many of them came back and were like, oh my God, that was so amazing. I want to do this again.
Once they started to see the picture of what we were doing, they became convinced that, okay, I can repeat the same move because that is a visual cue for something else to happen. So it took a while for them to buy into it, and we actually went through several incarnations of groups of performers who would show up and then wouldn't show up and would show up and wouldn't show up, till eventually there was a core group that said, we think we see what you're trying to do. But it took a while, and I love the idea of creating theater with not going somewhere and bringing a theatrical form to them, but saying, yo, y'all are doing this already. And that's how it happened for me. I went to a crump session and I saw this was in the summer in San Bernardino. It's 100 degrees with no air conditioning. And they're like telling stories with their bodies, and they're like, when they're not in the circle, they're off to the side, like working things out in their head. So when they get back in, and I'm like, yo, this is like they're telling stories and they're using their bodies in just these very extreme, powerful, ways. And so I thought, there's something there, and I want to figure out how we can use that to tell a story. And so that's how it came about.
And so when it comes to dances that are in the play or in the performance, what's that look like on the page? Is it just they dance, or they crump, or is it like, or how? What do you write? Because obviously you bring somebody in who's going to choreograph. Is my,
Yes. And so what I will do is I will describe the intention behind the action. So, for instance, in Buck World 1, there's a moment where the dancers are creating the universe, and so there's a ball of energy that they toss to each other. So they get the energy and they do their thing, and then when they're done, they toss it to the next person who catches it, and so for me, structurally, I'm able to say that this ball of energy goes from here to here to here to here, and then the crump movement, the movement that I would like for you to embody is water, or is fire, or is earth, so that then there's a structure of a journey of a play, but there's the freedom to improvise within that structure. And that's the way whenever I write, because I'm a storyteller. I'm not a former anything. I'm not a former MC, breakdown. I'm not. So for me, it's a matter of figuring out how to tell a story using elements that are not easy to put on a page. Dialogue is easy because those are words. But then when you're dealing with dance and movement, when you're dealing with tableaus or these abstract concepts, how do you put them on a page so that you don't have to be there in order for that thing to happen, but it can actually go out into the world, on paper.
Which is one of the first things I wrote down as soon as you said tableau in the very beginning, and then I'm like, how do you write that?
That one I didn't write. That one I directed.
Okay.
Because that one was more experimental, and I was kind of hesitate on that word. I knew I saw the vision. Like I knew I had been to the pageant of the masters. I had seen them creating these tableaus, and I'm like, yo, that's cool. But what would really be cool is if there was some music and some movement, and so I knew what it is that I had in mind, but I didn't know how to put it on paper to construct it. So the script that I have is reverse, right? So the script is essentially a notation of what we did.
Got it. And then let's talk about Riverside Studios a little bit.
Yeah.
What is it exactly?
So Riverside Studios is a space that I established in the Inland Empire with the goal of having a place where members of the community, students, anyone can walk in with an idea and leave with something. That idea could be a play. That idea could be a short film. It could be, we had podcasting space. We had graduate students working on their dissertations in the space. And the first space that we had was a former animal shelter, which I found really compelling and interesting. And so we the space was really functioning during the pandemic, and during that time we had everything from Riverside Unified School District filming their plays in the space, because during the pandemic there was we weren't in person, so those types of things happening. We had short films being filmed by faculty members and students. We had, I mentioned a student who was working on his dissertation. He was working on his PhD in music at UCR, and he used the space to create. I'm not going to do justice to what he was doing, but he was working with sounds or microphones that could be attached to this table, and this table then becomes a speaker. So just experimentation in the space. And so and now I think now they're doing work with gaming and with some sports teams. But the idea was to create a space where work could be done, where expertise could be accessed without necessarily having to be a student at UC Riverside or any of the other universities, Loma Linda University or any other schools in the area. But to create a space where you could, like I said, you could show up with an idea and we could connect you with, look, here's someone who's a cinematographer. Here's someone who does sound. Here's some, here are actors. So that's the vision behind Riverside Studios. What I've done in the past few years is we had a space, and up until last year we had a smaller space where we did the same exact thing. But what I want to do now is I want to focus on not necessarily looking at having a space, but having an entity that then can finance or can support or can make these things happen, so that we're not so much just about the space itself, but it's about the idea and the concept. And so the last play by Rickerby Hinds allows me to do more of that type of work than just writing. I shouldn't say just writing a play, but writing takes so much. So that's one of the things that has kind of moved me towards, hey, you know what? I can support more folks. I can do more with these types of spaces. So yeah.
You said that Latino Theater Company commissioned.
Yes.
How did that work? Did they like, hey, we have this great concept for a play. It's going to be your last one, but we're gonna commission you to write your last play.
So that would have been cool if they had done that. So I am part of what's called the Circle of Imaginistas. There are 11 playwrights that the Latino Theater Company, Jose Luis Valenzuela, artistic director of Latino Theater Company, and LATC, decided to essentially bring these 11 playwrights together. We meet on a regular basis. It's been about 3 years, and he essentially commissioned each of us to write a play with certain parameters. The play had to have to deal with Latinidad, and then there was a list of topics that I completely forgot about when I decided to write this play, of things that he would encourage us to write about, but it wasn't mandatory.
Right. Okay.
And so I think the last play will be the third or fourth play that was commissioned through that process and that will actually be produced. That was the beautiful thing about being a part of this group, is that I'm not writing a play in a vacuum the way a lot of us write plays, where it's like, I have this great concept, I'm going to put in a year or two and write it and then hope someone does it. This was actually a commission it wasn't a set in stone promise that it would be produced, but there was the very, very high likelihood that the play would be produced. So that like being a part, and then I'm in a room with other like really amazing playwrights and brilliant minds. So I'm not just working in a vacuum anymore, but I'm working in a space where I can get feedback from other really great playwrights. I can access actors to do readings once we get to a certain point, so that I can hear it out loud, and even getting thoughts and ideas from designers and folks who may be choreographers or who may have ideas and thoughts on, yeah, man, when you get to the lighting on this thing, I see this or I see that, or sound wise I hear this or that. So it has been an incredible space for me as a playwright to be in. It's I haven't had a space with fellow playwrights since graduate school. So it's nice to be in a place where you're talking about work, and you're not, as when I'm teaching, you don't have to have the answers. You can actually have a bunch of questions for your colleagues.
So how frequently are you meeting, and from what time to what time?
We meet probably every couple months, every 2-3 months, and we will meet for about a week. And these are playwrights from all over the country, so folks are being flown in, and it will be an intensive week of readings, of us watching plays at LATC, of us getting feedback on our work. So it's really like that time is amazing. And then we go away and we write, ideally,
right,
and we come back together. It took me 2 years to get to this play. I started on 2 other plays that didn't work out, and it's how I arrived at the idea of a playwright trying to write a play and that not working. And so, but even during that period of time, we were still gathering, and I was still gaining knowledge and support and seeing work by other folks in the circle. Yep.
Okay. Wow. All right. Fascinating. And do they find you, or is it a submission thing?
I was found. The Jose Luis Valenzuela was actually happened to be one of my professors when I was at UCLA, but also I had my play Dreamscape was part of the Encuentro. So an Encuentro happens every, I believe every 2 or 3 years, and it is a gathering at LATC of playwrights, actors, performances from all over the country, and as well as internationally. The last one just happened this past year, and so I was a part of that. And as a result of being a part of the Encuentro in 2014, when he decided to put this group together, I believe he remembered my work was all right, and so he said, I'm gonna have you come join this group. So it's I think it really is a process of awareness, and there wasn't a submission process necessarily. Mm-hmm. I believe there may be in the future, but I lucked out.
What's the rehearsal process been like?
Rehearsal process is always, for me as a playwright, it's a strange space, because there are things that I will see as the actors are playing around with the work that I may want to interject, or I may, and so having a director in the space, I essentially kind of have to hold back and go through the director and get that information to the actors. But what I love about being in a rehearsal space is it helps me so much, because when I write something, I'm in a room by myself playing around with characters in my head.
Right.
And so in my mind, certain lines of dialogue work perfectly. In my mind, certain movements happen, and it just works amazingly. And so then to be in a room with actual human beings doing actual things is just invaluable. And it always makes my work better. Being in a rehearsal space, being in a workshop space always improves my work. And this is something that I didn't know until I went to graduate school, because prior to that, the rehearsal space was just me hoping my friends would show up and hadn't lost their script again. So that was a different kind of process than showing up and they're actors with highlighted lines of dialogue and like questions about, like, I'm like, wow, this is a different thing than, Curve Man, I need a new script because I can't find it. So I love that space. I love actors, and I know that sounds like a kind of just a basic statement, but I love seeing human beings who will commit themselves to a role or to a moment or to a scene or to doing a thing without inhibition, just doing that thing. And part of it is because I don't have that ability. Like, I've pretended to act in one of my plays, then I realized I was doing it as a service, because I never fully stopped thinking. I never fully, let myself be the character. Right, and so being in that space, I say all that to say, I love being in a rehearsal space, in that creative space.
Is this a hip hop play?
It is not. It's not.
Okay.
Right. It is. I don't even know how I would define it. There are elements of hip hop in the play. There are elements of straight up dramatic performance. There is gospel or spirituals being sung in the play. There, there is dance. It wouldn't fall into that category based on my own definition of what hip hop theater is. The way the play moves, I want it to move like hip hop, and I'm not even sure what that means exactly. But when I see transitions, when I hear how the sounds are happening in the play, I hear hip hop elements, sometimes overt elements, like I mentioned, the stopping of the record playing.
Right.
And then there are times when I hear transitions or I hear or see things that I've experienced in hip hop music, in hip hop dance, and in hip hop performance. So aesthetically, I think there is an undergirding of hip hop in it, but it's not overtly a hip hop theater play.
Do you find, watching this happen, that they're capturing everything that you intended?
Yeah. So this is the thing. There are places and moments where I'm like, that's the thing, and we're still being in the rehearsal process. One of the things that I have to remember is that I'm older. And so a lot of times I have to remember, these actors are in their 20s, maybe in their 30s. And so when I make references, say, this should sound like, when Tupac was battling Biggie, I have to remember that that's something I actually went through, but for them, it's a point of reference in history. So,
right.
So in those cases, I try to make sure that I am able to give them things to go check out versus me being, because, once again, as playwrights, you understand, you have to make sure the work can exist without you, because you're not always going to be there.
Right.
So it's both dynamic and compelling and interesting and really cool, and then it's brings an awareness that, yeah, man, you can't reference KRS-One or Public Enemy with that kind of ease. You have to explain who Public Enemy was and
Sure.
what their influence was.
You started moving through something. You were talking about creating your characters. I want to expand on that. When you're like this dialogue, and how do you develop your characters like that? What all are you doing? What's that mental game? That's not, what's that mindset that you're going through, that process, mental process?
The one that resonates the most with me was when I wrote Dreamscape and creating the character of Maisha, a 19-year-old black woman who passed away in 1998. And so what I would do was I had the coroner's report, I had police report, I had all this information. But after gathering all that information, I would sit and I would think, if I was a 19-year-old black woman being shot to death, whose life existed in this period, what might be going through my head? What might my points of reference be? What would be important to me at that age? So it's essentially like just being still once I have infiltrated my mind with this information, and then seeing what I hear or what that character might say when certain things happen to them. And so that's really the process that I go through, like saturating myself with the information, creating, or clearly as playwrights, we'll look at friends and family and go, oh, this is like my aunt so-and-so. So pulling that part of it, but then shaping the character so that the character serves the function that character needs to serve in the story that you're telling.
But what about characters that you don't have a reference to?
Then it's the research. It's the research. So so when I created Ra, we mentioned, Ra is a combination of Run DMC, I think Rakim, and so what I did for that play is I created characters that were based on certain styles or types of MCing.
Okay.
And then I also took the character from the hip hop, from the opera, from The Ring, and then I looked at who that character was in Norse mythology. So Ra, the character in Keep Heads Ringing, is based on Wotan in Wagner's Ring, which is based on the All-Father in Norse mythology. Okay. So I did research in all those spaces so that then I could feel comfortable in putting words in the character's mouth.
So do you determine all your characters before you start to write, or do you let them speak to you first and then start figuring them out as you go?
It's a combination of both.
Okay.
So when I start to structure a play, I will usually know who the characters are in the play itself. So I just wrote a play called Black Box for the Ford's Theater in D.C. And Black Box is based on the life of Henry Box Brown, who shipped himself to freedom in a box in 1849. And so I was fortunate to have Henry Box Brown's narrative, and then I read other narratives and I read other books on that period, that 1849 period. And so in constructing the character, I took a lot of the words from the narrative itself and constructed the story using those words. And the play itself, Black Box, is a magic show. So Henry Box Brown put himself in a box here, disappeared, and reappeared here, free. And so for me, plus I've always wanted to do a play with magic, but for me, this play had to be a magic show. So the play begins with the character standing on top of a box and saying, I, Henry Box Brown, grown tired of my chains and such, will get into this box and I will disappear. So he's using the structure of a magic show and a magician, but the words that he is using are all words having to do with freedom and freeing himself. Wow. So he gets in the box and there's magic music and the assistant comes out and spins the box and then opens the box and he's still in the box. And he comes out of the box, runs off stage, and then we hear his voice saying, thunder is the voice of God the Almighty. And this is what my master would say to us children when it was about to rain. And he comes out and he talks about how the master would talk about how beautiful the flowers were, and he makes flowers appear. And the structure of the show is watching him do magic tricks until he gets so good that he gets back in the box that he got in at the beginning.
Wow. That's awesome.
So structuring, so that one was, I almost feel like I cheated a little bit just because the narrative just lent itself to telling that story of magic. The bonus was I discovered in subsequent writing that Henry Box Brown went on to become a magician after he freed himself. Wow. And toured as a magician, even recreating his escape. And during that period, mesmerism was big when it came to magic. Right. So I think he was more of a mesmerist than a physical magician. But finding that out once I started doing the research was like, yo, this is too much,
What are you working on right now?
Really, just the last play.
Freedom from playwriting.
I am the last play. So what will likely happen is I have several plays that I have first, second drafts of. So I have a play on Frederick Douglass called Blood of Souls. I have screenplay idea that I'm working on. So this being the last play, I'm gonna go back and finish or complete or make better other works.
Yeah.
But I don't see myself going, dang, this is a really great idea. Like, the comic book. But maybe since I had that idea already, I really won't be doing an.
I like it.
So that's what I'm working on. I'm completing this the last play, and then I'm there. I definitely, the Frederick Douglass play is one that I want to. I have a second draft of it, but I think I'm going to do another draft or two, and then move on that one. But I'm still writing. It's just that traditional process for me, at least, of idea, research, execution, rewriting is likely won't happen. Not in a bad way, just
Sure.
those energies will go elsewhere.
Where can people find your work?
You can find Rickerby Hinds, Rickerby.Hinds. If you Google me, I will pop up. I'm at the University of California, Riverside. So if you go to that website, I am there. And clearly right now, LATC, the Latino Theater, LA Theater Center, and the Latino Theater Company. There's a lot of information coming out right now about this play, and it will take you to other things I'm working on or other things that I've done. And I'm so hyped about this play. Not because it's the last play, but just because of what I believe, what I try to do with it, and the way the story is being told. And I've never written a play in this particular style. So people say it's very meta. I didn't set out to write something that was meta, but I'm excited to see like how this thing works.
Sure.
So yeah.
Well, I'll be sure to definitely include the ticket link below, and what I'm also going to do is re-record my intro to include the play, since I didn't include it on the bio page that I was reading from. And now,
but that intro is dope, though.
Well, I'll try. I'll see what I can do. Maybe I'll just add it. I'll edit it. I'll edit it in. And then finally, are you on the socials?
I am on Facebook. I am on Instagram. I don't know because we're in the process of restructuring those. But yes, I am. So I don't know what my socials are, though.
I can research them. I'll include those down below if you want them included. We don't have to.
Absolutely. Yes.
Absolutely. Then we will.
So I'll get those to you.
All right. Well, Rickerby Hinds, thanks for coming on to this episode of Playwright Spotlight.
This has been great, except for that one question that day. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Again, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and share this show with your friends. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. And in the meantime, and until we see each other again, keep writing.